Okay, we're going to be working tonight on introducing Unit 6 as we're moving towards midterm grades. I do want to just let you know that the Unit 6 homework is included in your midterm grading if you're curious. So you got to make sure you complete the assignments in this unit folder um, to count towards your midterm grade. The major topic here for this unit is working with some of the visual tools that are built into Excel. And I know that some of you have probably played with these, but I'm going to assume that if you have used any of these tools in the past, it was always on a pretty rudimentary level. Like maybe you had a class, in high school or some other program or something where it's like, okay, let's make a bar chart or let's make a pie chart. And you just click a couple of buttons and you do it and you look at it and go, oh, wow, great. And then move on.
I have a question for you about this.
Yes, absolutely, Anthony.
So with all of the new, I think since maybe 18 or 19 version, all of the new 65 UI, do you like that as well, since you've been getting used to it? Because I know I used to be pretty comfortable with all the old stuff, and now it's completely different. I don't know where stuff is.
Yeah, I'm getting a little perplexed by it myself, but I have been kind of pushing my way through it. So in other words, what Anthony's talking about is some of the ways that we used to put charts and graphs on the screen were kind of like this built-in way that Excel did it for about 20 years. And then in the most recent versions, they're kind of ramping it up, and the tools have different interfaces in some cases. And a good example is like the Power Query Editor, where the newer versions have that, and then we saw Arnie earlier trying to import data, and he was still working with the old data import wizard. And that it's all because of different versions of the product. And so yeah, there's some differences, but you know what, Anthony, we'll figure out our way through them. And you can usually be rest assured that some geek out on the internet has like a YouTube on it, or Microsoft has some information on it too. They're usually pretty good about updating their training materials through their website. And it always astounds me that people don't even think about looking on the Microsoft website for answers about Microsoft products. We usually go to like third-party sites first. But yeah, that is a pretty good point that they have been changing how stuff works. And so some of the resources that we have here kind of talk about that indirectly. But we'll take a look at some of these technologies. So
Yeah.
some of the key ones are the ones that you see listed right at the top of the topic list, which is line, bar chart, and pie charts. And those are the most common kinds of charts that we see in Excel. But we also have things that are a little bit more advanced. For example, we have pivot charts, which are sort of related to pivot tables, so some concepts transfer over. And then we also have what we call scatter plots, and then what you'll also discover is there's even higher levels of tools, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And in some cases, all the visualizations that you create are adjustable, customizable, stylable. You can do some pretty crazy things with it if you really are that inclined. It does help in many cases to have some fundamental knowledge of, plotting of mathematical formulas and how they should look. So for example, we were talking earlier about Solver, and how in Solver, if you know that you're working with linear equations, which would plot lines on a Cartesian coordinate system, versus something that might have a logarithm in it that might form a curve, right? And being just able to identify it, knowing those types of things help you with some of these things, because then you identify those patterns in the output of the visuals, right? And it's kind of interesting to see those correlations. Now, what we're going to do first is I want to actually jump down to here to talk about some of the types of charts that are used in data visualizations. And there's actually two documents here that are both, I think, pretty nicely put together. And I'm going to just click on the first one. So these in a sense, we don't have a required textbook in this class. So some of these materials are kind of like our augmented, textbook, so we don't have one. So I make the assumption that you guys are going to read this stuff or at least peruse it and kind of absorb like the key points. And this article here, you can see it's not that old, does talk about different types of visualization. So like one of the things that is happening right now in the world is we're moving into this era where data is becoming important, and how we show the data is also becoming even more important, because that's how we communicate information to the world. So often you look at these graphics like this, which is a combination of different types of data visualizations put together into one interface that's typically called a dashboard. That's what this type of thing looks like. It kind of looks like, a dashboard, right? So there's lots of information there in various formats, and you notice they have a variety of different types of visualizations. They have kind of like a line chart with a fill underneath. They have kind of like a weird version of like pie charts, with various color coding, this kind of like reverse funnel shape, then a traditional bar chart, and then lists. But all those things are different types of visualizations, and all of them have their own type. So this is what we call a bar chart or a column chart. And
I wasn't sure if you wanted to, but you're not recording.
Oh, I absolutely am. I'm not using the Zoom recorder though, Anthony.
Gotcha. I wanted to make sure. All right.
Yeah, I'm using my other recorder. I'm finding that sometimes the quality, particularly with the audio, is better, but that's just a matter of opinion. The only negative to using my other recorder is that green line that's around my screen, which you guys don't see, but I see will be recorded in the video. But it's a small price to pay, I think. All right, so this is a column chart. Next, you'll notice a traditional bar chart. So a bar chart really, like a column chart, just goes the other direction. You can also kind of refine that, and you can have them perform in different ways. So like this is one that is using the 0 point in the middle and then drawing data in different directions. And so this is potentially a useful graphic. The next type is what we call a line chart, and I'm waiting for the graphic to render here. You guys, I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but let me see if I can just re-render this. And if it doesn't pop up here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to download it, and maybe that's the smarter move here. And let's just open it well, of course it opens there again. I'm going to open it up with Acrobat is what I want to do. All right, so let me see if those line charts appear here. Okay, they look grayed out. All right, well, that's not good. And this is an area chart. So I don't know what's happening on these particular documents here. Are you guys getting the same thing on your documents? All right, I'm going to assume. All right, well, we'll have to just assume these. But I don't know if you can make it out through the bad visual here, but basically an area chart is like a line chart with the bottom shaded in. That's what it's supposed to show. There's pie charts, so I'm not sure what's happening with this PDF, folks. I apologize.
Yeah, I'm getting the same thing.
Okay, so it was just poorly digitized. I'll see if I can find source material. Then we have scatter plots, bubble charts, and all of these are becoming pretty irrelevant if we can't see the graphics. So I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to click off of this, and I'm going to make a note to myself here to fix that graphic. And let's go back to the core shell and look at the other document. And maybe that one will help. So let's take a look at this one. And the last time I looked at this one was fine. But they're kind of doing a little bit of the same. So they talk about taking data and moving it into visual formats. So they start to talk about how to plot things. And in some cases, we can also multiple plot different types of data on top of charts that we're creating depending on the type of data we're working with. And so this shows a combination of a column bar chart along with trend lines for certain pieces of data and then other calculations superimposed on top of it. This, in this case, return on investment, which is a, I think what we call an inverse logarithmic curve relative to sales, typically. All right. They start to like break this down and start to talk about the components of a chart. So often we are looking at something that operates, particularly with a chart like this, with an X and a Y axis and plotting things in ways that make sense relative to the data type. Sometimes you can plot the same data in a different orientation just by flipping the chart, and it can speak in a different way. So depending on how you're trying to convey the information, you have to start looking at how you're displaying it. Does it make sense to do it vertically or horizontally? Or is this type of chart really the best type of chart to show it? Labeling will ultimately become important. So Excel gives you tools to control all the labels on the sidebars and the bottom. It also gives you tools to create legends automatically, and to add all these additional calculations. By the way, there's dialog boxes for all of that. And so they walk through the process here of how to do this. They show you can click in, add a chart, step through the process. And what I would like you guys to do is to play with some of these tutorials that you're seeing here and try to make some determinations about the stuff you're working with. And if you are working through this stuff here, they kind of walk you through systematically and talk about which one of these things is good for certain situations and how to achieve it. So you can see all the different styles. So here's more of the line chart that we weren't seeing before. That's a very typical visualization, and they keep taking you through all these examples, and they show you, see all the different types that they're showing you here in the sidebar. Now, the one thing I do want to point out with Excel as you're starting to read about this stuff and starting to play with it is you can take sets of data. So you can see I have a bunch of Excel files open here, and maybe we can just kind of go to our beer thing, right, and our profit. And could I, for example, create a chart based on the stuff that I have here? And of course the answer is absolutely yes. I'm going to insert a blank column here just so that this data doesn't bleed over. But I'm going to take this whole thing, this whole table of information, and highlight it. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do an insert. So you go to the insert menu, and I want you to show this. This is really kind of neat. They have what we call recommended charts, right? So like you don't even have to kind of guess in some cases of what would be best for this. You can just start trying things. So I can click here, and what they're recommending is some charts like this. So you can see like possible different results, where they're breaking stuff down by categories. And you know what? You only know if it's going to be appropriate by ultimately just trying it out. But you get a little bit of a preview of what it's going to kind of look like, right? And then you can compare it to all the different types of charts that are available. And when you really start to break this apart, it's actually a hyper impressive list that they have here of possibilities. And you can get very granular and detailed. You can get really generic. Some things will lend themselves really well to certain charts, and others will lend themselves well to other types of charts. But I'm just kind of really quickly kind of going through all the different possibilities here and showing you some of the visualizations that are available based on the current data set that we have. And I think it's really kind of bizarre to do that. Now I'm going to go back to the recommended charts, and I'm just going to kind of pick one here at random. And the one I think that's probably most interesting is, let's look at this bottom one because it's got a trend line on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. And then I want you to see that this is being created. In fact, it's already on this sheet here. I'm not sure why it condensed down like that. I'm assuming because I'm at the bottom of the sheet. But here's the chart that was created. And yes, it's sitting on top of my data, but I can pick that up and move it to wherever I want to. And I'm going to just do a couple little things here just to maximize my screen space and also so that you can see this visualization being created. So let's take a look at what it did automatically without us making any sort of decisions. Notice that the bottom part of the legend here seems to indicate nachos, pizza, popcorn, hamburger, etc. And I'm not sure what these numbers represent. It says the vertical axis of 9,000, 8,000, 7,000. What do you suppose that is? Well, heck, we don't really know, right? Here on the other side, we have percentages. It goes from 0 to 100%. Well, is this really relevant to us in any way? What is this showing? Well, here's the point, folks. We really don't know. We don't really know what data is being put here. And just because I chose this visualization, I don't know what they're trying to show us, frankly. And in this case, we would actually try to figure out why they're choosing this. But you can label these things. You can create different systems. This one to me is actually seeming to be a kind of a useless chart, even though it seemed pretty cool from the picture, right? And this is the kind of thing that happens. And some of what you have to do in some cases is think first about what chart would be helpful. And, you know, I'm kind of thinking that maybe a column chart or maybe a bar chart might be helpful. So why don't I click on this as a possibility, and then I can look at some of the possibilities. So I can do 2D columns. Now that one seems to put like dollar amounts and beverages and stuff in there. This one here, see how they give you like previews of these. Sometimes they give you previews. And then we can go the other direction as well. And I think I'm just going to try one of these generic ones here, and let's see what this does for us. And sometimes you just basically have to play with it until you get one that you like. And this is one of the things that makes Excel a little bit different than working with some of the high-end visualization tools, is with a high-end visualization tool, you get very granular control over these things. And in Excel, sometimes you do not. And that's kind of the frustrating part of it. However, you will find that if you play with these enough, and Anthony, I assume this is what you were talking about, you're going to notice that there's ways to come in here and change all this stuff. And they have some really bizarre detail in here. Like it looks like beverage, hot food, whatever. And I'm not sure how they're breaking this down into what category, but they do seemingly have some sort of totals that they're putting in here, and we might want to consider what these things mean. So this takes a little bit of playing with, and in terms of what chart is right for what situation, it really comes down to a matter of kind of experience. So part of what might happen is you might discover that maybe the data that you're really looking at isn't the best data for doing the analysis. Maybe the better data is this table. And so what if I take this table and do a chart? Maybe this one will be more useful for us. So maybe I can come here and try one of these. So let's do a histogram. And I want you to notice what this does. It says we can't do this with the pivot table. We have to copy the data outside the pivot table. So I can do that. I can just come in here, copy this, create a new sheet, paste it over here. So now these are hard-coded values, I assume, and they are. Now I should be able to create a visualization, because now this is basically hard-coded information. Now, what the chart is showing us might not necessarily be what we want, but let's just go ahead and see what it creates just out of curiosity. But this to me seems a little bit better than some of the other ones that we were doing. So in this case, we're actually seeing the total sales for each one of these products. And right now, I am including the grand total column, but what if I decide, you know what, I don't want to include that one? Well, then it automatically scales. You see, one of the beauties of the product. So here we see all the different products and how much of each we sold, and clearly beer and popcorn are the winners, right? This other line that sits here, what is this line? It's given a name, but what this is representative of is the working up to that 100% total. So when I added beer, that was about 20% of the total. Added popcorn, that's another whatever, and then it's just working up towards 100. Do I need this line at all? Well, here's the thing. You can, if you didn't want this line in here, you can actually delete it. And I'm not sure if I deleted the line. Let's try selecting it again, and then you can delete it if it lets me. Yeah, it's not letting me do it directly, but we could choose a different visualization and that would go away. So this is kind of, interesting to play with. In some cases, you do have to tweak things. You can also go into some of these chart elements. So for example, you see how this box is highlighting, and then I can go in here and I can start to do some formatting. So, I can create by category so that it automatically recognizes the category. We can change, the tick marks on the side. We can change the number values, and all of these can be customized depending on which thing you're going into. I am noticing that we are now at the end of class time, and this is, I know, a very, very, very brief introduction to charting, but this is all we have time for tonight. So I'm ending this recording now.